Hi, welcome to Rheingold U. This is Introduction to Cooperation Studies, and today is Friday, June 5th, 2015, and today we're going to be talking about social dilemmas. So, John, you had a practical tip to share. Why don't you do that?
Yeah, practical tip. It may be a little bit naive for those of you who are alumni of Rheingold U, but what I discovered is that there is a box that enables you, when you do an entry, that enables you to have a text email issued to your email address. So in organizing the material that I'm following the most closely, using my email as a way to track those areas of interest that pertain to my own studies in this class. It's kind of a nifty organizer. I think that we also ascertained, based on at least this operator's experience, that the search bar is not particularly useful. I'm finding it to be very slow and not a significant way to get back into the material.
And also, I would remind people that in the forums, the easiest way to kind of breeze through it is to click on the forum tab, and then you will see a link that says read unread posts, next unread post. And if you just click on that, you can read the posts that have appeared since the last time you were there, and you can pass or you can post. But in any case, you can then see everything that people have said since the last time you checked, which is why I urge people to check a couple of times a week, so you won't be overwhelmed when you do that. Oh, I can see you now too, Paul. Today we're going to talk about social dilemmas, and Margit volunteered to do a learner lecture. I urge you all to do a learner lecture. Don't let the word lecture throw you. This is just, if you've read one of the recommended readings and you think there's something that would be of interest to the rest of us, please feel free to sign up and take a few minutes during a live session. So look at the recommended readings, and if there's something there that particularly interests you, then you can share what you know. So Margaret had a slide. I'm going to upload that slide now.
Very exciting slide.
It's a simple slide, but I think will help understand the simple notion here. Can you all see that now? In the middle pane.
Mm-hmm. Yep, I can see it.
Okay, great. And by the way, if you look in the lower right-hand corner, it says default layout. You can change the layout of the page. If you don't like what you've changed, you can go back to default. You can also hover over the margins between the different panes and enlarge some and make others small. I urge you to keep the chat open, so that's a good place to communicate issues that you've got and to talk as a back channel. So Margaret, take it away.
All right. Hello, everybody. So first of all, I'll excuse myself if I start coughing. I'm still at the end of a very long bronchial cold, and talking, of course, makes me cough. So when no one came to the table to do this, I thought, okay, what can I do quickly to help out? And I looked through the recommended readings, and I saw this parable of the tribes, and I thought I'd read through it and see what I thought of it. I think it's a very powerful argument. The argument was actually made by this Mr. Schmookler in 1984, is when he published his book. So it's been around for a while. And what he's doing, if you know the readings that we did for this week, talked a lot about social dilemmas, but it also talked a lot about what's called the common sense view of social evolution. And that particular view, in short or in simple, is that we are a product of the choices that we've made, we meaning society, all of society, and that these choices are made to continually or continuously better our society or better human lives or whatever. And I think that Schmuckler is coming up and saying, no, that's not exactly right, and that that the evolution of civilization is probably more a mixing or meeting of that particular common sense view, which is, of course, we're doing what we want to do for the betterment of humanity. And his idea that there's a problematic systemic selection made about the way things go that are attributed to the grabbing of power. I suppose that's the easiest way I can say it. And he sees power as contaminating other ideas or other developments that could go forward. And so, and his meaning of power, his is the capacity to achieve one's will against the will of someone else. Okay, is his meaning. Now, he writes a parable called the Parable of the Tribes, and that's what is up on the screen right now. And basically, and I'll read part of it and then describe part of it, is he's saying that imagine a group of tribes living together within reach of one another, and if all of them choose peace as the way to live, then everybody gets to live in peace, okay? However, if one particular group decides that they don't want to do that, they're going to go over to, let's say group A goes over to group B, destroys them, and there you've got your destruction as one of the options, and takes everything that they've got and defeats that tribe, okay? And then, or you could go over and take over a tribe and absorb them and transform them to do things your way. And so now group A and B, one has been taken over, B has been absorbed, and C is looking at it going, I'm not sure I like this, I'm leaving, and leaves the whole area and goes somewhere that maybe isn't as nice to live, okay? There's not quite as much land, quite as much water, quite as much whatever. So they withdraw, and they're not really in great shape. And then there's the fourth one, which is the imitation, with group D saying, wait a minute, if they're going to take all this power, I'm going to take a bunch of power, and you've got war. You know, you've got people totally taking over the other. And so his theory of social evolution really is that power, it comes down to power and choice, okay? And he thinks that they need to be combined in some way. However, he thinks that the drive for survival in any tribe, any society, makes that selection for being the powerful one inevitable. And so he talks a lot about war and peace, and he talks about how there have been some anomalies like Gandhi, you know, or others who felt that, you know, they didn't have to take over the world with power and whatever, that you could do it with ideas and with a soft shoe approach to changing people's minds about how to live. And so if you read his whole article, he doesn't come out at the end of it being completely negative about the evolution of humanity, but he does say that we've got to be very aware that it isn't just the common sense view. It isn't just about doing good things for good people and good times and everybody's doing well. That power is always there. And the interesting thing that I thought when I had was looking at it and reading some other things, his conclusion sort of is that selecting power as your way of moving ahead is really not your willingness or desire to injure other people. What it is that you're totally indifferent. And I thought that was an interesting point, that you're indifferent to other people as opposed to willfully wanting to hurt people, okay? And so again, his theory is that it comes down to that choice, and I'm not clear exactly which way things are going to go, but he's suggesting that that only looking at one way of the evolution of societies is erroneous, and that you need to look at this power piece and how that has moved tribes and peoples and countries and societies to do things in particular ways. And of course, all of this, of what he's talking about, I think, connects well to all of those game theory things that were going on in the readings, you know, the whatever they were, the Titfortat and the prisoner's dilemma and all, I can't remember them all, but all of the different ones. He has this particular theory, and that's really all I have to say. I think you should read the article. I think it's really good. I was just going to see if his theory really, as I say, the most interesting thing to me as I'm looking back over his stuff is that he is saying that even though people are going to take over power, and I have to say, I was looking, the first thing that came to mind was Hitler, and I thought, well, I'm not sure he was indifferent. I don't think that one works. I think he was clearly trying to hurt people, but I can see on a bigger, broader, further away level, what Schmucker is saying is that there are other things that guide this grasp for power than really caring about what the individual in a particular group is going to feel. And so that's that. And that's really all I wanted to offer. And those are the 4 different ways that he says that tribes can go. And I think as I look at history, a lot of that is very true. And so that's my very mini presentation.
Fantastic. Thank you, Margaret. And that's exemplary. When I say sign up for a learner lecture, I mean, do what Margaret did. Find something that's interesting to you and tell us something about it. It doesn't have to be elaborate. I would open the floor to comments on this. I have some comments, but I'd like to hear what you think. Schmuckler essentially is saying that that the gravitational force of power bends everything else, and that when power is exercised, it sort of removes choice. You either have to fight against it, you have to surrender, or you have to go away. What do you all think?
I have a comment.
Okay.
I did not get to that one yet, Margaret, but I'd be interested in knowing if he sees patriarchy and gender control as being part of the etiology of the parable.
I wouldn't be surprised. I'll tell you what the problem is, and I think I'm going to look up that book. It's a full book that he wrote in 1984, and this particular article we're reading is his very shortened version, sort of excerpts out of his book, so there's not enough there to fill in blanks like that in terms of exactly what, I mean, I think we could certainly take that, his parable, and go there. I don't think that would be impossible. On the other hand, I don't know, what would you say on the gender part? What would you say? Would you say that women are starting to imitate men, or women withdraw? And I mean, how would you play that?
Well, it would certainly make an interesting vector into readings about the feminization of social cultures in the 21st century, and the extent to which those relationships of power are driven by these lineages of patriarchy.
You know, something interesting comes to mind in that regard is that the Iroquois Confederation, the men decided whether to go to war, but the women hid the weapons. So the women had to agree in order for the men's decision to be effective. I would in the in the chat we're talking about Robert Wright as a kind of a complement or a Hegelian antithesis to Schmuckler. Does anybody want to talk to that?
Well, I thought it was very good. I don't want to dominate too much of the conversation here. It's very good. He's also quite funny in a sardonic way. And it has the concision of a TED Talk, which is one thing that I did not find in the our 20-minute presentation. That was quite good, by the way. Your friend, now deceased from UCLA, Howard, what is his name? I've forgotten it.
I'm sorry, who?
The viewing for this week, your friend from UCLA.
Oh, Peter Kolek, the late Peter Kolek, I'm afraid.
The late Peter Kolek, yeah. In the chat, my comment about what was interesting and, if not cool about it, was that he does see enlightened self-interest as a method for propelling positive social social interactions. But he adds, and this I think takes us into maybe where we're headed in the next class, he adds that it's really the articulation of ethical conduct or moral codes that are part of the legal and sociological component of culture as a way to keep the players honest.
One of the things that Wright proposed was that one way in which competing tribes can find their way out of the inevitability of violent conflict is commerce. And I would say that if you look at what's happening with the US and China right now, that's a very interesting situation in which we are seeing simultaneous military projections of power and commercial intertwingling. I mean, China can't afford for the US economy to tank because they own so much of it. US debt in terms of bonds is owned by China primarily. Graziano, did you want to say anything about ritual?
We can't hear you.
I listen.
Okay, I unmuted you. We can hear you now.
No. Can't hear you.
But I'm not able to articulate an argument, a conversation, but it's okay. I try to get what you are saying. I'm okay.
Okay, great.
Thank you very much.
So we mentioned ritual. I think let's circle back to ritual. An interesting conversation happening in the chat now, and I don't want to stop that, but I also want to go through the presentation. So let me upload the presentation.
While you're uploading, can I ask everybody a question?
Please.
I can't for the life of me remember this woman's name. I loved her work. She was an attorney out of California who did a book on anthropology, and it was called, oh my God. She was studying ancient cave paintings and discovered that the pictures that the male anthropologists had interpreted as people walking along with weapons in their arms were actually people walking along with stalks of some kind of crop. Okay, so that they were actually cooperating and bringing the crop and not going off to war. And and if somebody can remember her name, I have her book, but it's in my office in Honolulu, not here. And I have tried just for the longest time, because I thought her work is really important to this in terms of how we interpret, and goes back to, was it John that you were talking about the gender thing?
Yeah.
Yeah, in terms of how we interpret information, differently.
When you get back to your office and you see that, maybe you could do a brief blog post with a link to it.
Okay.
Mary Daly.
That's what he said. I'm going to look it up. So go ahead, keep talking.
Okay, good. So we're going to talk about social dilemmas this week. And I've asked people to get ahead of the readings so that we can spend the week starting today talking about them in the forums and the blogs. This slide is of a concept map. It's one of the texts. And the concept map is something that a smart student of mine at Stanford did to try to show some of the connections between the different aspects of social dilemmas. So you'll see that there's a URL there. The URL will give you the concept map, which is a clickable map, and you can then click on the little document icons to see the documents behind them. So I just wanted to introduce that. So Peter Kolek, there's a video and a PDF by Peter. I highly recommend this. In fact, when I asked students to do literature reviews, I had them read this because I think it's the best literature review I've read, and by which I mean he's gone through all of the research papers about social dilemmas and has explained them as a narrative with references to the source documents in the narrative. And Kolek gives a simple explanation of social dilemmas. It's when individual rationality adds up to collective irrationality. And I've got a picture of a traffic jam there because it's rational to jump in your car. I'm getting a little bit of an echo, so if somebody doesn't have a headset, then you might want to mute your microphone until you want to talk. But when everybody gets in their car, we get what you see there, a traffic jam. And when we get to the tragedy of the commons, that's an example of individual rationality aggregating to collective irrationality. And then, there's a fundamental tension behind this, and the tension exists even at the level of the cell membrane. And that's the tension between self-interest, maintaining the integrity of the individual, is the first duty of every biological organism from the cell on upward, versus cooperating with others. Do I join into a multi-celled organism? As an individual human, do I join in collective action? Next week, we're going to talk about the way humans in particular solve social dilemmas through symbolic communications and the creation of institutions for collective action. But I want to note that when you're talking about the social dilemma, that really does operate at many different levels. We've seen the prisoner's dilemma and the tragedy of the commons operate at the level of fungi. And in fact, we saw kind of prisoner's dilemma game theory when we talked about rhizobial bacteria that provide nitrogen to the roots of plants, and how the plants may select among the bacteria according to whether the bacteria are trying to dominate the other bacteria. So keep in mind that this is kind of general. Oh yes, Mary Douglas. In fact, I have her book on my bookshelf as well, and we'll go fetch it when I'm done talking here.
No, I don't think it is Mary Douglas.
No, Mary Oh, it's not Mary Douglas.
No,
Oh,
I don't know
okay,
why I
sorry.
can't remember even the title of the book. It drives me crazy. It's one of my favorite things. It's old age here.
So you know what? It will surface in 15 seconds or 15 minutes or the day after tomorrow.
Or in 3 months when I get back to my office.
or the mystery of, I bet you that it's going to come to you while you're walking or
I'm
something.
telling you that I've been thinking about it for about 3 weeks now, so it's really irritating. It's a long one.
You know, on my daily walk, there's a common plant. In fact, our neighbors have the plant that I forgot the name of it. And it just bugged me and bugged me and bugged me. And then I'm eating dinner 2 hours later, and the name of the plant pops up. And I can't remember the name of the plant.
It's probably a rose. No.
It's something that grows to a hedge very, very quickly, and that you use if you want to make a fence against your neighbor. You want a privacy hedge. Anyway, there are actually three mythic narratives that people have built around social dilemmas. There's the prisoner's dilemma, the tragedy of the commons, and the problem of public goods. And for the sake of simplicity, I'm only going to talk about two of them. But public goods is interesting, and we can talk about that in the forum if you'd like. So the prisoner's dilemma was actually based on a mathematical matrix. I'll get back to that matrix. That game theorists at the Rand Corporation, where game theory was invented by John von Neumann and Oscar Morgenstern, specifically to try to rationalize the kinds of strategy involved in thermonuclear war strategy, where, of course, two players who have opposing interests do not want the least optimum strategy, which would be mutual assured destruction, but neither do they want to be dominated by the other, parable of the tribe. So what are the choices they have? So this is a lens. Remember I talked about lenses and frames? This, of course, does not encompass all of the nuances of international relations, but it is an interesting abstraction. So you've got two players, and each has two choices. To cooperate or not to cooperate. And that, of course, makes a 2x2 matrix, which means that you've got four different outcomes depending on what each player chooses. They had a meeting about this at Stanford in the 1950s, and a social scientist created a game or a narrative about this game. And the narrative goes like this. You and another person are arrested and accused of a crime, and you are interrogated separately, in separate rooms, and you can't communicate with each other. And you are told that if you don't cooperate with the other prisoner, in other words, if you confess, if you rat them out, things will go easier for you. Or you can remain silent, and that's cooperation. So if you both remain silent, that is, don't betray each other, you get the outcome in the lower right-hand corner, which is actually the optimum for both of you, which is you go to jail for 6 months. If you both betray each other, if you both defect, in the words of game theory, you both go to jail for 2 years. So it's 4 times heavier. However, if you choose not to betray, not to defect, and the other player chooses to betray, to defect, then the other player goes free, and you go to jail for 10 years, the upper right corner of the matrix. That's known for the person who cooperates and stays silent as the sucker's payoff. And it's known for the person who defects, who betrays, as the temptation payoff. What happens when you do this game over and over again? That is, instead of just making the decision once, you make the decision once, you can see what the other person decided after they decide, and then you do it again. That's called the iterated prisoner's dilemma. And Robert Axelrod, political scientist, interested in, again, preventing nuclear war. Graziano, I see that you're want to make sure that he can hear. I'm not sure what the issue is there. Axelrod proposed what's called the iterated prisoner's dilemma. That is, the players play it over and over again, and then after each move, they see what the other player did on their last move. And he invited people, different kinds of people, computer programmers, game theorists, biologists, ecologists, political scientists, to devise strategies in the form of simple computer programs. And then he matched all of the strategies against each other in a computer simulation. And interestingly, one strategy came to dominate, and it's called tit for tat. Very simple, only two aspects to it. Always cooperate on the first move, and then follow suit on subsequent moves. On your next move, do whatever your partner did on the last move, your opponent did on the last move. So if you both cooperate on the first move, you both get the optimum strategy. Now, I play this game with students by asking them to get into two rows and face each other and put coins in their hand, and then put either one coin in their hand for defect, or two coins in their hand or for cooperate, or 0 coins and 1 coin, and then they hold their fists out and reveal at the same time. And the person, if they both cooperate, they each get another penny. If they both don't cooperate, nothing happens. If one of them cooperates and the other one doesn't, then the non-cooperator takes the penny from the hand of the other. So you can accumulate points or money in this game. And if you both cooperate all the way along, you both get the most money and you will win the game. If your opponent defects on the first move, you defect on the second move. And if they switch back to cooperation, you switch back to cooperation. Interesting. Pan per focaccia. Well, I know that pan is bread, and I know that focaccia is a kind of bread. That's kind of interesting. So and this game has been played tens of thousands of times, if not more, all over the world. And what he discovered was that after he went back to all the people who played the game, who submitted strategies, and told them that tit for tat was dominant. They went back and created new strategies, played the game again. Tit for tat won again. So tit for tat is a very powerful strategy. It is not dominant in all situations. There's one that relates to evolutionary theory, which is called win, stay, lose, shift. So if on the first move your partner cooperates, you stay and cooperate again. If on the first move your partner defects, you go find another partner. There's another one called generous tit for tat that says every once in a while randomly cooperate when the other party defected, because communication, even in a simple communication, is never perfect, and noise enters the system, and you want to give cooperation a chance to get started. And generous tit for tat can come to dominate in a system. Generous tit for tat can lead to a situation in which people who always defect come to dominate. So it's an unstable situation when the defectors discover that everybody else is cooperating and that they can win, it begins to shift back to tit for tat. There's another game that I think gives a very interesting viewpoint on human sense of fairness. It's called the ultimatum game. Two players in separate rooms, don't know each other, don't communicate, never meet, never communicate. Welcome, John. I don't know when you showed up, but welcome aboard. You can go back to the recording later. And Tatiana also came in late, and you can go back to the recording later. So anyway, player one, you say, here's $100. How much of it do you want, and how much goes to this unknown player in another room? And player one could say, I'll take 99, and the other one gets $1. Or player one can say, well, 50-50. Then they go to player two and say, player one says, you get $1, but they get 99. Or player one gets 50 and you get 50. And player two can decide to accept, in which case both players get paid, the game is over, and they go home, and they never meet. Or player two can decide to not accept, in which case neither gets paid, the game is over, both players are not paid and go home and never communicate. So early in this conversation, the question was asked, is self-interest the basis of rights strategy? Modern economic theory holds that individuals act in rational self-interest. So it's not in your rational self-interest to turn down $1 because somebody you don't know and never will meet gets $99. But it turns out that time after time, when this game is played, if player one deviates too far from fairness, if maybe they say 65-35, fine. Maybe 70-30, but if they get towards 80-20, player number two quite often rejects it. Why you would turn down $20 because somebody else is getting $80, who knows? What it does suggest is that there is an innate sense of fairness. And that's very interesting in regard to cooperation theory. However, a group of anthropologists took the ultimatum game out to a number of different societies: nomadic herders, slash and burn agriculturalists, tribes in the New Guinea highlands who used sweet potatoes as currency. And in the currency of that society, they played the game and found out that from society to society, the average response was very different. There are societies in which the player number one is always generous. There are societies in which player number one is always stingy. There's societies in which player number two always accepts, and there are societies in which player number two always rejects. And there's a book written about this. It turns out that the conditions of life in that society determine how they're going to play the ultimatum game, which I think has a much more interesting implication, which is that the sense of fairness can be modified by the actions of the society. That the society, the culture, can affect what people think is fair. And if you can affect what people think is fair, you can affect cooperation. I think there's been some discussion in the forums and the blogs about how do you encourage cooperation, and that has a great deal to do with children's games. If you ever see children play games, probably the first thing they do is argue about the rules. Fairness is very important, even to young children.
Can I interrupt for just 1 second?
Yes, please.
Just back to the schmooker thing that I was doing. I don't remember where I read this, but one of the things that came up was that concept of the different cultures responding to that tit for tat differently. That there's also one of the problems with this parable of the tribes is if you have 5 tribes or however many, and each of the tribes has a series of a morality, the gods that they believe in, things that they do. You know, the American Indian is insulted if you look him in the eye. The white American is insulted if you don't look him in the eye. You know, that kind of thing. How do you take all of these different kinds of societies? But it's not even. We're not even talking resources at that point. We're talking culture, I guess. You know, in a society, how do you get them to work together? I think that's one of, and that's Graziano's right. The different cultures influence decisions that you make. And so power tends to be a default in all of those situations because everybody understands power and, you know, taking over the other, right? That's all, just a thought.
Yes, and also Graziano pointed out that communication enables cooperation. Communication between cultures does not guarantee peace or cooperation, but without it, that kind of getting caught in the rut of power is a much more powerful attacker. When you have, you know, it's interesting, you live in Hawaii. Do you know the origin of Hawaiian Creole language, Margaret? It's an
Do I know the origin?
Yeah. It's an interesting story. Well, you know Pidgin. You understand?
Yeah, Pidgin. What I'm thinking is Pidgin, right?
Pidgin is not an authentic language. It does not have all of the grammar that an authentic language has, but it enables Portuguese and Philippine and Chinese and Japanese, all the people who were imported to work in Hawaii, to communicate with each other. While they were out cutting cane in the fields, their children were inventing a language. It's called Hawaiian Creole, and it was invented by children. Just kind of an interesting aside there. And in regard to cultural differences, there's a book, the name of which will come to me, about different even gestures in different cultures.
Yes,
so in America, when you want to hitchhike, you stand by the side of the road and you stick your thumb out. In Greece, that's like standing by the side of the road and doing that. Body language, gestures, many different, whether you look people in the eye, those, like a sense of fairness, seem to gesture from culture to culture. And if you're walking in the market in Istanbul and people are trying to sell you something, don't go like this, go like this. I think intercultural communication is important, and let's talk about that, and let's talk about that in the blogs and the forums as well. So I was talking about these games. It's possible to do a version of the game where after the game, you can choose to take away money from the other player at a cost to yourself. So if you feel that the other player was unfair, they defected too much, they won too much, you can say, I want to take $5 away from the other player, it'll cost you $1. It turns out that people will spend money, which is not in their rational self-interest, to punish strangers who they feel are unfair. And they put people's brains into a functional magnetic resonance imaging machine while playing the game, and demonstrated that the parts of the brain that light up when you are punishing someone you regard to be a cheater or unfair in a game are the same parts of the brain that light up when you're experiencing other kinds of satisfaction. That's called altruistic punishment. Keep that in mind when we talk about sanctions next week, when we talk about institutions for collective action. There are two ways you can enforce behavior. Laws, you break the law, the police come and get you, or you get a ticket. Or there are norms. In some societies, people don't spit on the sidewalk because strangers are going to look askance at them. So it's easier to enforce norms because everyone enforces them. And altruistic punishment if you are in line and somebody cuts ahead of you in line, does that make you angry? That's the basis of altruistic punishment. And one of the scientists who conducted this research said that altruistic punishment may be the glue that holds societies together. So we talked about social learning. We talked about cultural evolution. I had a quote from Boyd, Henrik, and Richardson. If you're interested in understanding the cultural research on cooperation, I highly recommend Boyd, Henrik, and Richardson. But they had this statement that I will repeat because I think it's important. Surely without punishment, language, I mean, we've talked about both. We talked about altruistic punishment, talked about communication, technology. I would include language and writing as technologies. Individual intelligence and inventiveness, social learning. Ready establishment of reciprocal arrangements, tit for tat. Prestige systems. So again, that's a kind of norm. People who do things that are admired by others get a higher placement in their society. And sometimes that works well, and sometimes it doesn't. And solutions to games of coordination are societies who take on a distinctly different cast. Thus, a major constraint on explanations of human sociality is its systemic structure. And this is something I keep mentioning, lenses and frameworks. No single lens, neither punishment, nor biological evolution, nor power, nor communication, or game theory offer a complete explanation of human cooperation. But I think if you look at all of them together, you, as a system, it begins to become more clear. The tragedy of the commons is another social dilemma. So we've been talking about the prisoner's dilemma. The tragedy of the commons is a multiplayer prisoner's dilemma. It comes from the title of an article by Garrett Hardin, who's a biologist at Stanford University. He was concerned about the future of the human race in overpopulation, and he used the parable of the common grazing area in Europe and other parts of the world, where people had their own areas where they could graze their cattle and their sheep, but there was also a commons, usually in the center of their settlement, that anyone could graze. If there are no rules about it and everybody grazes, well, not maliciously, but just in their self-interest, as many cattle as they can, then eventually they overgraze and the commons disappears. And a great part of the earth has been desertified, has been turned from forest into desert by people overgrazing and by gathering firewood. So it's clear that people do this. The tragedy is that Hardin said it was inevitable. Humans will always do this unless you privatize the commons, or you've got some kind of Hobbesian authority. That, in essence, is the discourse about the tragedy of the commons. What this leads into next week, and let's save that for then. Let's save what you do about it for next week, because that's what we're going to talk about next Friday. But what's interesting about it was that for 10 years, scientists didn't really question the inevitability of the tragedy of the commons until Elinor Ostrom did. We're going to talk about that next week. Elinor Ostrom discovered, researched, and gave some a pretty good understanding of workarounds of the prisoner's dilemma and the tragedy of the commons. She called them institutions for collective action, workarounds for social dilemmas. This photograph here is one that I took in Bali. It is of a Balinese water temple. And the Balinese have a very interesting relationship to their religion. This is a religious temple. It also serves social and ecological purposes, and to them, sacred doesn't mean you leave it alone. Sacred means you go and bathe in it. So we're up to the top of the hour here, and I have been talking for most of the time, and I'd love to let people speak up. There's been a lot of interesting communication in the chat. So the floor is open.
Well, we've had some great Italian bread.
Yes. And you know, cooking and eating is a great intercultural form of communication. Who does not love pasta? We identify it with Italy, but of course Marco Polo brought it from China.
I have a comment.
Yes.
I hope that everybody has the time to take a look at the brilliant analysis that I had not known this man, mathematical biologist, Mr. Norwalk, is available online. And one of the things that he mentions, that was a kind of a remarkable insight for me, was that the way he puts it is species don't evolve, brains don't evolve, populations evolve. So the notion here is that it's the institutions, it's the modality of cooperation that actually is what is the basis of social evolution, not anything inherent to the individuals that make up any single population. I don't know if I framed that properly.
Although the individual does matter, because a population that has cooperating individuals may have a selection advantage over populations that does not have cooperating individuals. The cooperating individuals may be what they call altruistic, in the sense that they get nothing from it. They may even sacrifice for it. So, you know, last week we talked about the two theories of how cooperation may have evolved. One of them is kinship. You sacrifice for those who are related to you, and the other one was group selection. That groups. I'm equating groups with populations here.
Yeah, and I think that maybe to put more precision on the point, he was actually talking about biological evolution and not social evolution. Norwalk. He also does. Go ahead.
Is it Norwalk or Nowak?
Nowak.
Nowak. He has one of the readings is of ours, and also a video is by Nowak. But
yeah, the video was very good. And by the way, there's a long one and a short one, and the long one is very worth a while, summarizing the game theory basis of some of these ideas as the way a mathematical biologist would look at the problem.
I think there's a transcript that goes with the long one. I might be wrong. John, what do you mean by ski techniques? Oh, ski techniques evolve. Oh, okay, yeah. So I think I just want to say that the conversations that take place between these live sessions are really beginning to pick up, and I urge you to check the forums and the blogs more than once a week. Look at the social bookmarks. Make a social bookmark. Look at the mind maps. If you feel like it, make a mind map. At this point, we're about halfway through, and we're beginning to gel as a learning community, but that doesn't mean it's going to happen. And it doesn't mean it's going to happen until the end. Sometimes it happens towards the end and people say, wow, I wish we could continue for another 5 weeks. So I urge people to check the forums and the blogs, contribute whatever you can. It doesn't have to be an essay, several times a week rather than once a week. If you do it once a week, if we're doing things right, you will be overwhelmed by the amount of stuff. In regard to social bookmarks, if you like the idea of making bookmarks that you can tag and share and find out what other people find and share, there is something outside of the social media classroom that I highly recommend called Digo that you can check out. So we're at the top of the hour. I want to respect people's time, but I also want to give people an opportunity to ask a question or make a comment before we adjourn.
I had when I was watching Peter Kolak's talk, I had this question, I guess, because he asked this question about public TV, how many of you contribute, and he has this thought that there's always somebody who contributes, which is very strange, actually. I always wondered about how.
Well, that's the third mythic narrative that we really haven't talked about: public goods.
Yes.
So public television, public radio. It's a public good in that you don't have to pay for it to listen to it or watch it.
But the question that I had while watching Peter Kolak was, thinking about today's abundance of goods, of information that the internet gives us. I was sort of wondering if we would have an increase in, social dilemmas and also, in people who contribute or not contribute.
That's an astute question, because we're seeing both. Clearly, there's a tragedy of the commons happening with spam, with porn, with misinformation, disinformation, trolls. There's a lot of bad stuff, a lot of noise. But also, there's a lot of good stuff. There's Indiegogo, there's GoFundMe. I was, Margaret, when I was speaking at, Pacific
University, yeah.
Hawaiian Pacific. By the way, I had to finally tell them it was 9 o'clock, it's time to go home. It was a group that was really interested in talking. We were talking about the internet. We're talking about the same question. What about all this bad stuff on the internet? Isn't it just descending into the worst human behavior? And one of the people in the class said, I have to speak up and say that I am here because people I can't remember, it was either Indiegogo or GoFundMe, strangers contributed money so that I could go to school. So I think the answer, Tatiana, is that both are happening. And the way, there's something called the logic of collective action. Well, we'll talk more about collective action next week. The logic of collective action was written by a sociologist by name of Manker Olson. It's either E-N or O-N. And it has been taken to be the gospel, which is that any group of any size who don't know each other, are not related to each other, and are not motivated by financial incentives, are not going to create public goods. But we are seeing with the web, with Wikipedia, with Indiegogo, with GoFundMe, there are many, many, many ways that people who are strangers, who are not incented by financial incentives, are creating public goods. That theory needs to be changed. And my belief is that people will contribute if it's easy enough and inexpensive enough, if you lower the barriers to contribution. So I use some freeware that I find useful, and the author says, please pay me $5, and PayPal makes it easy. I can do it in 2 clicks. I'll do that. Not everybody does it. Some people do. I think the interesting question is, what percentage of the population needs to be contributing?
You know, it's interesting that, and I wonder if it's a coincidence or not, that you read now so much about procrastination, right? Everybody is sort of, you know, either self-blaming or feeling guilty about procrastination, you know, not sort of postponing things until later. And I was wondering if that is, you know, if that is a little social dilemma that all of us have to deal now with all this. And I wonder if it's an outcome of the abundance of information, or sort of feeling that somebody's out there on the social network who would do that for us. So, and then it sort of makes me think if we need new rules, or if we need to think in terms, or if our society may sort of elaborate some new norms to overcome this new, you know, challenges and new kinds of social dilemmas. So that, you know, you asked for comments. I mean, that was something that I keep thinking about a lot.
You know, I did a little, it's just a very small research study, maybe 4 or 5 years ago, asking the question about what moves you, and this was with students, both a bunch of students that, you know, they were doing Facebook things and also online. What moves you from caring to doing? Because I did a look at all of the philanthropic organizations that are available for people to be participating in on Facebook, for instance, and there are hundreds and hundreds, and people are, you know, everybody belongs to these 7 different things, and I kept going, well, okay, so I belong to the Save Darfur, you know, action group, but what moves you from actually just caring about it and saying, oh yes, I really care about all these people dying, to actually doing something? And it was very interesting. The response I got from students was, they're not going to do a damn thing, they said, unless they felt that they could actually solve it. I thought that was really I mean, I'm not sure what to make of that yet, even after all this time. But they're not going to just send $1 or $5 or something. They'll join the group. But if they feel that they could cure AIDS or, you know, get rid of whatever, then they'll go ahead and do it. But just that little bit, they don't care. Very interesting commentary on our youth, I thought. And yet they all belong to 7 or 8 or 10 of these organizations. Go figure.
Thank you, Margaret. I wanted to respond to Tatjana because I am a huge procrastinator. I spend all day on social media, and I've done so since 1985. But hey, I've written a dozen books. I taught courses for 10 years. My strategy is, when you're procrastinating, do something else. You're always doing something that needs to get done. It might not be the thing you're supposed to be doing right now. So if I'm supposed to be writing a book and I don't feel like writing, I could go back and edit what I wrote yesterday. I could go organize my resources. I could go on Twitter and ask people questions about the subject. So I think that procrastination is a force that can be channeled And I think that it's something that can be learned.
Yeah, I guess
This is
it's also different. We need a different mentality about these things, right? Because, you know, I recently I've been thinking a lot about changes, you know, in industrial economy versus post-industrial society and the norms that emerge with two types of production. And I wonder if what you are saying here, that you're sort of outsourcing your procrastination or channeling it, you know, finding different things, is also, you know, something that we have to account for in this new society that we live in. That maybe we shouldn't be afraid of procrastination. It's not such a sin anymore, you know, as it has been in you know, in an industrial society. I don't know.
well, you know, somewhat tangential to what you're saying there is the issue of social capital. I find that if I give away a lot of stuff online as part of my procrastination, then when I want something and I ask a question, people reciprocate on that. So I think that that's sort of one of the drivers of social media for those who know how to use it well.
Yeah, it's just it just requires a change of mindset, just like co-learning does. So, but
yes,
yeah, okay.
And I'd say that today's session's a good example of us beginning to get over that barrier to co-learning and beginning to talk to each other. One thing that I have learned and continue to learn as an educator is when to shut up and let the learners talk with each other.
Okay.
Anything else?
More on this. Yeah, so.
I like to encourage people to use the asynchronous media, because sometimes after a meeting like this, there's a lot happening in your head and you think about it and then you've got something to say. We don't have to wait until we're together synchronously next week. We can go ahead and blog about it. We can comment on other people's blogs. We can contribute to the forum about it. We do have this chat that's very rich. And if somebody wants to save it and summarize it, pull the URLs out of it, all you need to do is right-click on it and copy all the text in it. Well, if you're on a Mac, you can control-click on the chat, and that will enable you to save all the text. So somebody wants to do that, and you have it formatted, then communicate with me about it, and I will help put it onto the wiki. So there will be missions this week. The games this week are about the prisoner's dilemma. The games I'm looking for are about tragedy of the commons and commons issues, and that's for next week. So I will send out the missions straight away. Great session, exemplary session, and I am going to stop the recording now.